Hey guys, it's Vanessa and welcome back to my channel. Hi, it's Editing Vanessa here, and just a couple things before you get into the video. One, I filmed this when I was 20, I'm now 21. Two, I give a bit of a backstory of my family's religious impacts on me and how that shaped me and my coming out story. As well, I don't want anybody to think that I'm biphobic or have anything against the bisexual community and whatnot, or like getting into the bisexuals versus pansexuals. It's nothing about that. Like, we are a community. I found a term that fit me personally that I connected with, but other than that, this is my story. I met people who were transphobic, who were biphobic, who were against the community, and I didn't know a lot about the community when I was coming out. I was very sheltered. So my knowledge on it and how I spoke looking back at what I knew and what I thought at that time is very different than my knowledge now and my views now. But love to all. Know that you are all loved, valid, and love is love, and live your best life, whatever that means for you. So, sending love and positivity, and on with the show. Today's video is the second most requested video thus far on this channel. People wanted to know my journey and my coming out story, and this is that. So, as a bit of a backstory, growing up, I had great parents. They loved me dearly, although no longer together. They were still friends and in the job of raising a child together. And in that, they were always very loving and supporting, and they always wanted the best for me. This being said, although my family was very supporting and loving, they weren't necessarily strictly religious or strictly science-based. They wanted me to have the best of both worlds. But at times when I was geared more towards science, they would try to level it out and bring me to church more often and to see the priests and whatnot speaking about God and a higher power and all these things. So religion was an aspect of my life, but it wasn't as strict or as structured as most people. I did occasionally go to Sunday school, I did occasionally go to church services, but they also made it so that I got to view other religions as well and taught from a very young age. Like, I would go to the synagogues and temples and pray with different religions and learn different religions and pathways so that I could have a more grounded and open look at the options this world seemed to provide in society. My parents chose a very early point in my life to make sure that I had a very diverse upbringing so that I could be respectful of all people and be polite to the best of my ability. From religion, of going to the different temples and synagogues and churches to learn others' religions and to be respectful and aware of their beliefs. That was one aspect. Another aspect was I'd go to the hospital with my grandmother with the therapy dogs and see people with different disabilities. And it was taught not to be feared, but if you have a question, to ask somebody and to learn, not fear. And some of the people I met there were the nicest people that I'd ever met in my entire life. And then along those lines, my parents would show me the different political views in elections and would teach me history so that I could learn of different people and where they come from so that I could better respect and understand them as I grew up. With that in mind, this was sort of how my life was shaped, to be balanced and understanding and diverse. So a lot of people online and people in my everyday life didn't assume I wasn't straight. A lot of people thought I was strictly straight and could never like anybody else. Well, that's not true at all. I'm pansexual. That is how I identify. So the big question in this video is kind of how I identify as I'm not straight and how I came out and my journey and pathway to really discovering who I am. And I'm going to tell you right now, have I figured out who I am to a T 100%? No. I'm 20 years old. But I have figured how I like to identify myself, what feels most right and comfortable with me. And hey, we learn new things every day. But as of right now and this point in my life, this is who I am, or a part of who I am. And I'd like to share it with you all. I identify as pansexual, and a lot of people I've met don't know what the letters in LGBTQ+ stand for, and they don't know all the definitions, and many haven't heard of the term pansexual. So I wrote it down from what Google has to say. Pansexual is a sexual, romantic, or emotional attraction towards people regardless of their sex or gender identity. Pansexual people may refer to themselves as gender blind, asserting that gender and sex are not determining factors in their romantic or sexual attraction for others. So, that is Google's definition, and another couple catchphrases you might hear is, I fall for hearts, not parts. That's like the main one you hear because it's really true. For me, it's about what's on the inside that matters, not the shell that it comes in. So a lot of people ask, when did you realize you weren't straight? When did you realize that you were different? I'd like to say I always knew, but the youngest memory I have was maybe when I was 5 or 6 years old. When I was around 6 years old, I had a friend, and we will call her Sally. And Sally and I were best friends, and we used to hang out all the time, and it was one of those things of we wanted to play princesses, but it was always taught to us at a young age that a princess had to have her prince and a prince must have a princess. You could never have a princess and a princess or a prince and a prince because that's not how it was shown in the movies. So whenever we would play princess, it would always come to, well, who's gonna be a prince? And Sally or Susan or whatever I named my friend basically used to turn around and say, well, I'm not a boy, I'm not going to play the prince, you get to play a prince. And for me, I didn't understand that because I wasn't a boy either, but there's nothing wrong with liking a princess if you're a princess too. But it was frowned upon, so I'd pretend to be the prince and just go along with it. But then later as time went on, I started to repress these feelings because in the church that I went to in Sunday schools, it was taught that homosexual relations were a sin. And although my family doesn't believe in that, it really impacted me. So I thought I had to forget about this feeling and the butterflies in your stomach and your heart skipping a beat if somebody was the same gender as you. And for that, I basically pushed down the emotions and said to myself that I had to forget about it because if there was such thing as heaven and I wanted to be there, then I had to stop being sinful and thinking in these evil ways, which is ridiculous because it's not something my parents ever preached to me, but it was in teachings I saw. And because I didn't see any role models in the social media or media around me, I thought that this was the only way I could be. And so I forgot that I wasn't straight for quite a while. So along my journey, I kept those feelings buried for quite a long time, and then when everybody started dating, which for me was really young, around 13 years old, I would profess that I am straight and I'm an ally of the LGBTQ community and I want their rights to be heard, but I'm not gay, I'm straight. Which, sweetie, past self, you aren't straight and that's okay. You're loved regardless. So yes, that was a huge thing. I got in relationships with strictly cis males for many years, and it was something of, I was happy in my relationships, but then when I was single, it was something of, I was curious. I would question myself, but then have to think, no, I just think that girl's pretty in a platonic way, right? When I was 14, I finally admitted to myself that I might not be straight. I remember for the first time saying it out loud to myself, and I cried because I'd not seen representation for people like me. And I felt isolated and alone, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody, even those closest to me. And I felt like I had to hide this part of myself. And so, in high school, that can be a hard thing. High school, although a place for new experiences, and that can be a good time for many people, and it's a very educational place. Stay in school, kids. But it was hard, and I judged myself harder than anybody in this world ever could. And with that, things became more difficult when I was single, and you get a crush on that girl in your English class, but you're not supposed to have a crush on that girl in your English class. And I had friends at that point who were out and who were gay, and it was perfectly fine. But I knew I wasn't just gay, and I knew I wasn't just straight. So figuring out where that middle ground was very confusing for me. And because of that, I wasn't ready yet to share with the world this truth of mine. The beginning of my grade 11 year, I had started hearing more about the bisexual community. And it was something that interested me because I thought, well, maybe this is a place where I belong. Maybe these are the people who will understand me and where I can find a label that matches what I feel on the inside and I can feel at home. But I struggled because I saw the internalized homophobia and the internalized transphobia and bigotry in the community itself, which for a community who's gone through so much, I was surprised that we would still be butting heads with each other when the rest of the world seemed to be against us, and why we wouldn't be protecting each other more. And don't get me wrong, the community has come such a far way, and I am so proud. But it made me question it because I knew bisexual people, friends of mine at the time, who would turn around and say, I will date a man, I will date a woman, but a trans person is not a person, and I could not date them because they are neither man nor woman. And that I didn't understand. I personally couldn't understand how love and affection and these emotions of the butterflies in your stomach and the pure falling in love feeling, how that had to be predicated on what's in somebody's pants. Now, I know everybody's different, but for me, I didn't understand that. And to have friends who were in the community who were transphobic, who wouldn't accept this, who wouldn't date somebody like this, which, you know what? Every person has their own values and their own things, but for me, it made me question, well, okay, maybe bisexual isn't the community for me because I find interest in more than just the category man and woman. The spectrum seems larger than that for me. And trying to determine where I sat on that spectrum and to decide if there was even a name for that was a hard thing because the representation wasn't in your face. Good old like Tumblr and like Google were your closest friends because I wasn't seeing anything being advocated for the community for people who didn't fit in certain categories. And besides the terms lesbian, bisexual, and gay, and like transgender at the time, four categories of how many? Those were the only ones that were represented in even my Gay Straight Alliance club at my high school. So I really wasn't aware, and I couldn't make a decision of where I sat, and I didn't feel like I could talk to the world about these feelings because I didn't even know what to call it. I remember in my senior year of high school, I had a friend who would talk to me about the struggles she faced being Christian and being bisexual, and seeing the struggles but seeing the merging and acceptance between the two. And I had family and friends who would reiterate to me, almost unconsciously, that you are loved no matter what. So I decided to tell my friend, first person I ever really talked to about this, of I think I might be something like bisexual, but I'm not really sure. And she was so loving and accepting, and it made me feel welcomed and comfortable and happy to know my feelings, although I might not have a label for it, are still valid, and I'm still loved. So in my senior year, I dove into learning about the community a lot more. And one night on Tumblr, of course, I came across a post that had all the names of the different aspects of the community and all the definitions and explanations for the spectrum that is in our community. And I stumbled across the word pansexual. When I stumbled across the word pansexual, I felt so relieved, because for me, finally, there was a word that matched what I felt on the inside. That it didn't matter what form or shell the person came in. The outside didn't matter. It was what was on the inside that mattered. And if I fell for you and if I fell for your soul, that's what mattered to me. And there was a name for it. And there were other people who identified with this name, who built a community, who shared their experiences. And I knew for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. And I cried. I sat there in my bedroom looking at this Tumblr post, crying like a fool, because I was just so happy to know I wasn't alone anymore. And that how I felt and what I felt, it was okay. And it was accepted. And that was one of the greatest gifts there was. So once I discovered really a label that identified who I was and how I felt when it came to love, I didn't quite feel ready to tell anybody yet. But I'd tell myself, I'd look myself in the mirror and go, you are pansexual, you are loved, you are accepted, and it is perfectly okay to be who you are. And I would do this every day. So I had discovered this mid to beginning of my senior year of high school, and I knew I wanted to tell my parents, but I didn't know how. And although I knew the people they were and knew that they were accepting, hearing all the hatred towards the community, not seeing representation, and hearing of people with the slightest religious background having such hatred in their hearts for the community, it scared me to think, what if me telling them this changed their opinion of me? What if they changed from the people I knew and loved and they suddenly hated me or didn't love me because of who I loved? Which, looking back, I am so thankful and grateful for the parents I have, because that is not who they are. They are loving and accepting, and I couldn't have asked for better parents. But I still had those fears, because in a world plagued by hate and violence and destruction, you wish and hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. So, did I tell my parents within a month? Nope. I worked myself up for almost 6 months with my mom, over 8 months with my dad. And it was a thing of, I was trying to figure out the perfect time, how to tell them. Would it be one-on-one? Would it be in a group? Would it be at a dinner? Should I wait till before we're leaving so I can boot it out the door before they know? But no, since my parents are separated, I told them to separate times. So I remember I was with my mom and my baby sister in the living room, and I was watching my baby sister play, and my mom came over and she sat down. She was telling me about her day and telling me about her work, and I just kind of looked at her and I was like, so I want to tell you something, but I don't know how you're gonna take it, and I want you to know I love you, and I don't want what I'm about to say to change how you feel about me. And I started getting teary-eyed, and she looked at me and she asked me what was going on, and I looked at her and I said, well, what if I maybe wasn't straight? And she goes, okay, well, whatever you choose to be, I love you no matter what. I said, well, I'm not straight, I'm pansexual. At that point, it was the question of, what's that? And I explained it, and she was very welcoming and very supportive and just let me know that I was loved. That in mind, I'm sure my mom had many hints, considering when I was strictly straight and preaching how I was simply a part of the alliance to the community. My mom would turn around and go, well, if a guy kissed you, how would you feel? I'm like, well, as long as it was consensual, okay. Okay, well, if a girl kissed you, how would you feel? I was like, same thing about the consent, but I don't know, it's not a bad thing. So I think with certain conversations and certain things, she at that point figured, and it was just a thing of you're loved no matter what. Then it came time to talk to my dad, and I remember leading up to this, I had almost told him 6 or 7 times of, hey Dad, I'm not straight. I didn't know how to tell him, and I didn't want to disappoint him. I love my dad, and he's a very strong and wise and accepting man, but I was fearful to tell him. He was always the stricter one out of my mom and him, and he always would take a time to consider things, but in a strong and stern face. You couldn't tell what he was thinking, and not knowing made me worry more, and I hyped myself up over this. And so I remember we were in the basement apartment the one day, and I just kind of turned to him and went, Dad, I'm not straight. And he went, okay, so what does that mean? And I said, well, I'm pansexual, guys, girls, transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, everything in between. If I like them, I like them. Yeah, that's how it is. And I remember him just kind of looking at me, and he went, so you mean we bat for the same team? I laughed. I was like, well, it's not the only team I bat for. I bat for all teams, but yes. And he was like, okay, good to know. And then next time he saw my mom, he didn't think she knew and went, psst, you know our daughter bats for the other team, right? Which my mom was like, yes, and? And I was very lucky that that is how my experience coming out to my parents went, and how accepting they were. With the rest of my journey, I told a couple friends, and they all seemed very accepting. But then it was the summer before my first year of college, and I wanted to tell everybody, but I didn't know how. And so with, I think it was either National Pride Day, Pride, or like Pansexual Awareness Month or something like that. And I just remember I had this top of Team Love, and I took a photo and me in this, and I just posted pansexual and proud, and wished for the best, basically, hoping that the people who loved me and were a part of my life could accept this. I was very lucky in the fact that my community loved me, supported me, and never at one point isolated me. And for the few people who I did lose, they clearly had different values and different pathway than me, and it was one of those things of at least we could go in a peaceful nature. They, yes, said negative things, but they never said any threats or anything violent or to the extremes that my case could have been, because you look on the news every day and you see the extreme cases. So I was very lucky in how my community accepted me for who I am and loved me as I am. So out of everybody, I have to say the person who had the best reaction to me coming out was my aunt. We always go for a walk around Thanksgiving with my little cousins, and I kind of just was talking to her about everything, and I told her and I explained the post that I'd made, and her thing was, congratulations, I'm proud for you, I'm so happy for you, like, congratulations. Is that a weird thing to say? Like, I'm proud of you for being who you are and loving who you love. And I kind of laughed because I didn't really expect that. I don't know what I expected when I came out and I told people, because this was just a part of who I am. And if you love me as I am, why would your views change? Because I haven't changed. It's just a part of me. And she was so proud, and she kept telling me how she was so happy that my younger cousins and her other nieces had me as a role model, and how to have somebody who was strong enough to step up and be that role model and to be that voice, to show the representation and to let them know whoever you love, it's okay. You are accepted. You are loved as you are, was a big thing. And her response was definitely the best and the most heartwarming, because it then changed my perspective from I should be open about this for me to not only am I being open about this for myself and my truth and my love, but to be open about this so I can be the role model and the representation and the conversation starter for my cousins, for my younger family members, for my friends and their siblings that I never had growing up, that made me more fearful growing up, that made me want to forget a part of who I am. And in being that voice, hopefully giving back and letting the next generation know that being who they are is perfect the way they are, and that they should be loved and accepted as such. And there's nothing more to it. It's nothing about tolerance or dealing with this stuff. If somebody can't love you and accept you for who you are, and if all they're gonna do is hate, then it is their loss and their ignorance at fault, not you. And you are loved no matter what. And I think that was the big message that drove home with me and made me speak out more and advocate more for our community, and to share my story and share my message with the world of love is love, and we should be respected and have the rights as everybody else. And just because you love the way you love doesn't mean you should be harmed or threatened. And the world is a scary place, but one act of kindness can change a person's life. And if you change one person's day, even with a smile, you've made a difference in this lifetime. And it's something I really live by and what I'm proud to share. So that is my very long-winded story and explanation for my journey and my coming out story to sharing with the world who I am. And I hope that this has helped or inspired or shed some light on who I am or helped you learn something new. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe.